Good morning, dear students. My name is Dr. Shuaib Mohammad Bhat. I'm working as Assistant Professor in the Department of English at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Today, in this video lecture, we shall be talking about barriers to effective listening. What are the different barriers? What are the different obstacles? What are the different hurdles to effective listening? In the previous lecture, we talked about listening, we talked about some stages of listening, but here today we shall be talking about the barriers. What are the different barriers which cause some hindrance in the process of listening? I would like to quote Ralph G. Nicholas. What Nicholas says about listening. Nicholas has shared a very important idea on listening. That is, the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood. The most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and to be understood. Every human being is having a lot of needs. But among all those needs, the basic need is to understand and to be understood. When you understand people, so you are fulfilling one of your needs. Because there is a need to understand people. People may approach you for different reasons. So you should understand people. You should have the capability to understand people. So then the second need is to be understood. There are a lot of things which you are expressing, which you are talking to people, which you are sharing to people. So in all the circumstances or in all such situations, you want yourself to be understood by others. So this is another need. And these are the most basic needs for human existence. So humans, we can survive, we can live life in a better way when we understand people and when we are understood by the people. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. So the best way to understand people, to understand and be understood by the people, is to listen them. So we can say, in other words, if we listen people, we provide ourselves a chance to understand and be understood by the people. So listening is the important key by which we can understand people and by which we can be understood by the people. This is what Ralph Nicholas said about listening. So by this definition, it's easier for all of us to understand the meaning, to understand the importance of listening, how important listening is. Now, see, how do you feel when someone does not pay attention to what you are saying? This is very common. When we speak something to someone, now there are people who may not attend us, who may not listen us carefully, who may not be paying any attention to us. So how do we feel when people are not listening or paying attention to our speech, to what we speak? So we generally feel neglected, we feel frustrated, or sometimes we feel insulted. And this is obvious when we speak, but we are not attended by the people. We are not carefully listened by the people. People do not pay attention to our words. So we feel as if we are neglected. We feel as if we are frustrated and we feel sometimes insulted. Because we are not getting that required attention from the people. And because people are not listening us. So the need to be understood is universal. It's universal to be understood by the people, the need to understand. So when people don't listen us, when people don't pay attention to us, we feel neglected, we feel frustrated, we feel insulted. So the need to be understood, it's universal, and it's only fulfilled when we listen with heart, with mind, and without diversion or without any digression. So this need can be fulfilled, this universal need of, of being understood, it can be only fulfilled when we listen carefully. Listen carefully means when we listen with the intent, when with the involvement of heart, with the involvement of mind, and without any diversion or without any digression. Then only we can listen carefully, and then only we can understand people carefully and clearly. And when people listen us carefully, then only we can be understood by the people carefully. By the we can be understood by the people. So this listening is important, and this universal need of being understood, it can be fulfilled by the listening. Such is the importance of listening, and such wider and such important is the domain of listening. We cannot neglect this domain of listening, because as I told you in the previous class, when we were discussing about speaking, speaking seems to as one of the important language skills and one of the important activities which all humans are performing on daily basis. But speaking, no doubt it is the main activity which we all are performing. No doubt it is the language skill which is being more used apart from other three skills. But this whole process of speaking is incomplete if we do not have listeners, if we do not have active listeners. Speaking does not mean only to convey information. Speaking means to convey information, then to be understood by the people and understand people. So to be understood by the people means when people listen us carefully. So listening has a very solid foundation when it comes to communication skills and when it comes to language skills. Listening cannot be ignored. It cannot be underestimated. It is there always. It's always there in the list of priorities. It has its own priorities. It has its own significance and importance. Why is listening important? Let's see why listening is important. Why is it in the first, it is being considered as the first and foremost language skill. When we talk about language skills, listening forms the first and the foremost language skill. We have four language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Listening comes at first. Why is it so important? Why every communication is incomplete without listening? Why listening is considered as the foundation of every communication? Why? See, great listening skills are a key part of learning and functioning in the workplace. In order to learn new things, in order to learn things in a better way, in order to learn more things, in order to survive in a workplace, in order to be excellent in a workplace, we need to inculcate good listening skills. So, listening can provide us the space where we can learn more, where we can learn new things, where we can learn in a very productive way. And listening can also help us, or listening enables us to function in our workplace, in our workplaces in a very proper way, in a very proper manner. Then, see, hearing the information, absorbing it, comprehending it correctly can make a huge difference in workplace. When we are at our workplaces, when we hear carefully, when we then absorb the information, we try to understand the information, we evaluate the information, and we comprehend the information, it can make a huge difference. Because your process of listening, it's complete process. Because the information which is being conveyed to you, you take it seriously. You listen it, you comprehend it, you evaluate it, and you try to recall it, you try to retain it for your future references. So this sort of listening is going to help you in a long run. It will have definitely the impact it will show your impact, your presence in the company, or your presence at your workplace. Now, many studies suggest that even the smallest improvements in a person's listening ability, even the smallest improvements in the person's listening ability can have a noticeable impact on the overall effectiveness of communication and productivity. There are certain studies of communication which suggest this thing that even the smaller amount or smaller improvement in the process of listening or in the listening ability, if a person is having a smaller improvement in listening ability, this smaller improvement can have a noticeable impact on his overall effectiveness of communication. So your communication can be effective only when you have the patience for the listening, when you are effective listeners. And if you are improving this effective listening skill, even if there is the smallest improvement in your listening skill, it will have a great impact on the effectiveness of your communication skill. This small improvement can make your communication more effective, and your communication will be productive. You will be able to convey the important information, and you will be able to understand the speakers very quickly without utilizing more energy. Then I would like to take the help of these two influential people. One is Castleberry and another is Shafford. So according to Castleberry and Shafford, effective listening occurs when there is a high degree of correspondence between the sender's original message and the listener's reaction of that message. Castleberry and Shafford, they talk about effective listening. What they speak about effective listening, they speak that effective listening, it can occur when there is a high degree of correspondence, when there is this strong relationship between the sender's original message and the listener's reaction of that message. So Castleberry and Shafford, they talk about effective listening. They said this effective listening, it occurs when there is the correspondence, when there is a strong bond between sender's original message and listener's reaction, recreation of that message. Sorry, it's not reaction, it is recreation. So all the listeners, they try to recreate the heard message by interpreting meaning from that, by processing that speech into words and sentences so that the reader or the listener may get exact information. So this recreation and the sender's original message, they should share an equal bond. They should share a strong relation because of this shared relationship, effective listening occurs. See, right now I am speaking to you. You should recreate my message. You should try to interpret my words, my sentences. You should try to process my words, process my speech in different words and meanings. When you start processing it, when you start recreating it, so you are indulging in effective listening. So you are cultivating the habit of effective listening. So effective listening means to recreate the heard words, to recreate the heard message, the message which we are hearing or the message which we have heard. If we recreate that message, that means we are doing effective listening. That means we know what effective listening is. Communication is a two-way transport. It's not only like the sender plays an active role, or it's not only sender oriented or sender centered. No, and nor is it the listener or the audience centered. It's both. It's a two-way transport where we require both speaker and listener, where both speaking occurs and listening occurs. So, but it is up to the listeners to make sure they are receiving the information accurately. See, as I told you, this communication, It's a two-way transport. When there happens any communication, it means two processes are going on at the same time. Two activities are going on at the same time. One is the activity of speaking, another is the activity of listening. So when these two activities are going on, the sender is just discharging his duty by speaking. The speaker speaks, but speaker cannot ensure your understanding. It is the listener who ensures the understanding of that message. The speaker speaks with the intention to be understood by the listener, but the speaker cannot ensure the understanding level of the listeners. He or she can only predict. A speaker can only simplify his talk. A speaker can only try to make you understand by giving many illustrations and examples, but he cannot ensure this thing whether the listener has or whether the listeners have understood the message or not. It is in the hands of listener to make sure whether he or she is going to understand the message or not, because it depends upon the effective listening process. When the listener indulges in the process of effective listening, then only he or she can understand that message. So we can say listening process, it depends upon the participation of the listener. How means how strongly or how seriously a listener takes the message, that can ensure the level of listening, right? Like effective listening or normal listening or surface listening. So communications occur, and communication can reach to its desired goal only when the listener plays an active role of listening or comprehending the message. So then, listening is essential for nearly all work areas. Every work area requires listening. You are a teacher or a professor, your area, you should be a good listener, because you have to listen to your students, to your colleagues, to your boss. You are a student, you should listen. You have to listen to your teacher. You have to listen to different teachers, different instructors, mentors, your parents, your elders. You are an engineer, you have to listen to your boss, to your manager, to the HR, to your clients. You are a normal shopkeeper, you have to listen to your customer. Or you are a customer, you have to listen to the different people where you are approaching, where you are going. You are a doctor, you have to listen to your patient. You are a patient, you have to listen to the doctor. So listening is the activity which occurs almost in every domain of life. In every area of life, this listening occurs. This listening happens. Now, these listening skills are crucial in teamwork, problem solving, decision making, managing, supervising, negotiating, customer service, and sales. As I told you, listening skill is crucial. It's important for every work area, and mainly it is used in problem solving, it's used in teamwork. We require listening for decision making. We have to take a decision. First, we should listen to people, we should listen to others, we should listen to the suggestions of others so that we can take an exact decision or a good decision. Then it's managing. For management, we need to listen to people, because when we take otherbody's censure, then only we can be able to do the proper managing. For supervising, it's better to listen to the people we are supervising. And for negotiations, we require listening. Customer service is incomplete without listening, and sales market is totally incomplete without listening. So every work area requires listening. Listening is having its say in every aspect of the life. In every profession, listening exists. So we cannot evade from listening. We cannot run away from listening. And we cannot underestimate listening, or we cannot ignore listening. It's important, and it will play its important role in all spheres of our life. Now let's come to barriers to listening. See, barriers to effective listening are present at every stage of listening process. At every stage of listening process, you will see there are barriers. A lot of barriers are there. It's not like any fabricated statement, or it's not my own opinion or idea I'm sharing with you. I quote this author, is Owen Hage. Owen says that barriers of effective listening are present at every stage of listening process. In the previous lecture, we talked about listening process, where we talked about its receiving, its interpreting, its remembering, its evaluating. So it's responding. Different steps are required for listening process. So different stages are there. At every stage, you will see there is a listening barrier. At every stage, you will see there are some barriers, there are some obstacles, there are some hindrances or clutches which stop you from effective listening. So, see, at the receiving stage, when you are receiving the information, some unwanted noise can block your effective listening, your listening, or distort any incoming stimulus, any incoming information, or any information which you are listening or hearing. It may be distorted, it may be interrupted, it may be blocked at the stage of receiving by some unwanted noise. Now, the second stage of listening is interpreting. At the interpreting stage, complex or abstract information may be difficult to relate to previous experiences. When you are interpreting the message, when you are just comprehending the message, so complex or abstract information may be difficult to relate to the previous experience. If you are going through some complex or abstract idea or some complex or abstract information, it sometimes becomes difficult to relate with your existing knowledge, because the concept which you are dealing right now is complex, it's abstract. So making it difficult to reach understanding. So it sometimes becomes difficult to understand the concept. So this is another hindrance which occurs there in at the stage of interpretation or interpreting stage. Then at the recalling stage, natural limits to our memory and challenges to concentration can interfere with remembering. Then comes the third stage, which we call recall or remember. So when you try to remember the information in your mind, there may be some obstacle may be there related to your memory. You may be having a poor memory. You may not be able to understand or retain the information in your mind, or you may not be able to concentrate on certain things. So such things can interfere with such things can interfere the process of remembering. Then we have another stage, that is evaluating. At the evaluating stage, personal biases and prejudices can lead to the block, can lead us to block people, to block out people, or assume we know what they are going to say. So sometimes at the stage of evaluating, some personal biases and prejudices about the people, they stop us to understand people. They stop us to listen people, because we are having some personal grudge with the speaker. So when we evaluate the information, like, was it his own opinion? Was it speaker's own opinion? Or was it a reliable information from the speaker? So sometimes our personal biases and prejudices, they stop us. They won't allow us to listen to the speaker. Then we have another stage, that is responding stage, the stage when we provide feedback. So at the responding stage, a lack of paraphrasing and questioning skill can lead to misunderstanding. Lack of paraphrasing. Sometimes we lack paraphrasing. Sometimes we lack question skill. The lacking in these skills, it can lead to misunderstanding. It cannot allow us to understand any topic clearly, or it cannot let us to know, to listen any concept clearly. So there are what I want to say, like I quoted Owen Hage. So barriers, listening barriers are at every stage of listening. Maybe whether it is receiving stage, whether it is interpreting stage, remembering stage, evaluating stage, or responding stage. So barriers are at every stage. There are different barriers at every stage. Now let's see what are these barriers. See, unfortunately, this effective listening can be held back by barriers. Unfortunately, as I told you, the importance of listening. We cannot ignore listening. Listening can never be ignored because every communication is impossible without listening. And now there are communications which happen with non-verbal communications, but that sort of communication cannot help you, cannot be applicable for all situations. You cannot pass some important information through nonverbal communication. You cannot record your rules, bylaws of any company within the nonverbal communication, nonverbal means. No, you need to just speak them. You need to write them. And when we write, we speak those things. So, but unfortunately, listening being an important element, being a fundamental skill for language learning, it can be held back, it can be stopped by certain barriers. These barriers to listening can be grouped into two main categories. So there are certain barriers which can stop our communication skill, which can hamper our this listening process in any communication. These two things, these two categories are external barrier and internal barrier. We have external listening barrier and internal listening barrier. Let's see what this external listening barrier is and what internal listening barrier is. External listening barriers, they are easier to manage than internal barriers. When we talk about external barriers, they are easy to manage. That means if in your effective speaking, in your effective listening, or while listening effectively, you feel there is any external barrier, there are chances you can remove that barrier. You can cover that barrier. You can conquer that barrier. There are more chances to conquer the external barriers rather than internal barriers. Why and how? See. These barriers, they include a variety of environmental distractions. These barriers are mostly environmental distractions, and that can usually be avoided or minimized with simple corrections. These environmental distractions, they can be easily avoided. They can be easily minimized with small corrections. Like, for example, removing yourself from the interfering barrier or removing the issue from the area that you are in. Like, how can we remove these barriers, or how are these barriers, external barriers, easy to recover? Like, you are speaking at a place where somebody is making noise. You can easily make him silent by requesting him or by some other degree. Or you feel you are or sometimes you feel you are listening some important lecture at a place where there is more noise. You can relocate yourself, you can go to some other place where you will find silence and you can easily listen. So external barriers, they are easily to recover and they are easily to remove or minimize through small corrections, which I told you. These external barriers, they include noise. Noise. Noise is the first external barrier. Like, any external noise can be a barrier, like the sound of equipment running, phones ringing, or other people having conversations. So, any external noise. For example, when you are listening to any lecture, that lecture is not a noise to you. If that is a noise, that may not be called as an unwanted noise. Obviously, every speech is made up of sounds, and sound is a noise. So, every external noise, unwanted noise, can be a barrier to listening. When you are listening to someone, if there is any external noise, some equipment is going on, it's making noise. Somebody's phone is ringing. Somebody is listening music. Somebody is talking to himself or to others. Or some other noise. Buses are going on. Trains are going on. Some external noise is coming there. That can be a barrier to your listening. So the first external barrier is noise. Then visual distractions. Some visual distractions are also harmful for listening. For example, you are listening at some place and somebody is coming and signaling to you. So it is a visual distraction. Or you are listening at a place, you see some goings on just beyond any glass wall. You see something is going on beyond any glass wall. So that can distract you from listening. So visual distractions, it's like some scenic happening outside a window or a wall. So this visual distraction, it can also distract your listening activity. So it is also another external barrier. Then physical setting and uncomfortable temperature, poor or non-existent seating, bad odors, or distance between the listener and the speaker can be an issue. We all are just sitting in this room. We have AC here. Everything is quite comfortable. If we do not have AC or fans, so it would be difficult to be here in this hot weather. So uncomfortable temperature, if we are having uncomfortable temperature, or poor seating arrangement, or non-existing, if we do not have good seating arrangement, or if there is some foul smell, or the distance between a speaker and the listener, if the speaker is listening at a far distance, where he is not easily audible to the listeners, so these all, they come under this physical setting, under this physical setting barrier, and it itself comes under external barrier to listening. Then objects, items like pocket change, pen, jewelry are often fidgeted with while listening. While listening, we are having this manners like to hold the collar, like to hold the jewelry, to play with the pen, or to change the pockets, to check the pockets from one pocket to another. So these things, they can also hamper our listening process. Then the person speaking. The person listening may become distracted by other person's personal appearance, mannerism, voice, or gestures. The person who is speaking, he or she should maintain that attitude, that tone, that complexion at the time of speaking, which is suitable to the specific listeners, to his audience. Because your voice, your appearance, your mannerism can distract your listeners. Sometimes you are having only one or two people to listen you. If you start shouting in front of them, they may not listen you because your voice is unpleasant at that time. You are having a big crowd of students in front of you and you are speaking very silently, slowly. Will you be listened by your audience? No, not at all. So this also becomes a barrier in the process of listening. Then we have the barriers, internal listening barriers. What are internal listening barriers? They are more difficult to manage. Rather than external, these internal barriers are difficult to manage, as they reside inside the mind of the listener. Because these barriers, they are inside the mind of listener. They are not outside. They cannot be removed. We cannot just get rid of these barriers while relocating ourselves. No, they are with us. They are inside us. Internal barriers, internal barriers is elimination. To remove these internal barriers relies on a high level of self-awareness and discipline on the part of listener. To remove the internal barriers, a listener should be highly self-aware. He should be a highly disciplined person. Then only he or she can avoid or distract himself from these internal barriers. It needs that strong self-awareness, like catching oneself before the mind starts to wander and bringing full attention back to the speaker. Sometimes your mind may start wandering about something else. Now you have to stay focused and you have to stay tuned with your speaker. This can only be done when you are literally self-aware person, when you are a disciplined person, when you have control over your mindset and your ideology. So internal barriers, they include number one, anxiety. Anxiety is common nowadays. Sometimes we are having some anxiety issues. So anxiety can take place from competing personal worries and concerns. It stops us to listen people carefully. Because when we are having anxiety, when we are having some personal concern, personal worries, we may not be giving proper attention to the speaker. Because we are struggling with some personal worries, some personal concerns which seems more graver or more serious to us at the time of listening. Self-centeredness. This causes the listener to focus on his or her own thoughts. When we are self-centered, when we do not care about others, when we do not bother about others, so what happens? We cannot listen others. Because we are self-centered people. We want to listen only about ourselves. We want to just be preconceived with our own self only. Then, mental laziness. People are having some mental laziness. This mental laziness, it creates an unwillingness to listen. When we are having mental laziness or any sort of laziness, we are unwilling to listen to people, to their detailed information. Sometimes boredom. Boredom stems from a lack of interest in the speaker's subject matter. If the speaker just is having lack of interest, boredom, it stems from the lack of interest. Yeah, sometimes we are not having any interest in speaker's subject matter. Sometimes the speaker, he talks about some outdated subject which we felt. So this gives us the boredom. We are bored. Hey, I'm not going to listen to this topic because I found the topic is boring at all. So then sense of superiority. And sometimes we are having this sense of superiority. We believe that we don't want to listen to people because we know everything. Then cognitive dissonance. It is the inconsistent ideas. Sometimes simultaneously inconsistent ideas are coming to your mind. So the listener hears only what he or she expects or molds the speaker's message to conform with their own beliefs. When you are having inconsistent ideas in your mind, you try to mold the information of speaker according to your own ideas. And that can be a barrier to listening. That prevents you to just decode the message in the expected way. So this is another barrier to listening. Then impatience. Impatience. A listener can become impatient when a speaker who talks slowly or draws out the message. Sometimes a listener, he becomes very impatient with the speaker because the speaker talks slowly or draws out of message. Sometimes the speaker makes digressions, talks slowly, extends his talk, or shortens his dialogue. So it makes a person impatient. A person may not listen to the speaker because the speaker is sometimes talking slowly or talking with an extra speed. So these things, they can hamper the process of listening. So working through these barriers are crucial for better listening. If you want to be the better listeners, you need to work upon these points which fall under external barriers and internal barriers. If a listener can remove these barriers, she will find that she can gain better understanding of the talks at hand. If a listener removes these points, has control over these barriers, cannot be distracted by these barriers, then the listener can get the best understanding of every talk at hand. So communicate more effectively. The listener can communicate more effectively. and achieve greater success in the workplace. The listener can achieve greater success in the workplace. So here I end my lecture. I would like to just summarize it once more so that you can have an exact idea. First, I talked about Ralph Nicholas. Nicholas says the basic need is to understand and be understood. This can only be done by listening. Then I have given you an example. If you're not being listened by the people carefully, we feel neglected, frustrated, insulted. So this can be done. This understand need to be understood can be done by listening only. Then I talked about why listening is important. Then I talked about Kesselberry and Shepherd. Then I just extended this importance of listening. Then I talked about barriers. I told you, here I quoted Irvin Hage. I told you barriers, they are at every stage of listening, whether it is receiving, interpreting, recalling, evaluating, and responding. Then I talked about two main categories of barriers: external listening barrier and internal listening barrier. Under external listening barrier, we have noise, visual distractions, physical setting, objects, and the person speaking. Under internal listening barriers, we have this anxiety, we have self-centeredness, we have mental laziness, boredom, and we have sense of superiority, cognitive dissonance, and we have impatience. I would like to stop here. Thank you. Thank you for listening me carefully. Thank you very much.
Like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.